When I was in seminary, there was this theological precept we learned when studying canon law, which are the laws that govern kind of the functions of the church. As some of you may know, within the church itself, we have our own kind of codes of conduct and even court systems and things that we use. Any of you who had to go through the experience of an annulment have confronted this firsthand. But the first thing we learned in that course was, as human beings, we create laws where love fails. If we could all live out of love all the time, then we wouldn't need guiding precepts to manage the small details of life, because we would know more deeply and intuitively what it really is to reach out in true care and concern and compassion and sacrifice to the other. But we're broken. We're imperfect. And so, when that part of us fails, we need those guideposts to keep us on the right path, to call us back to our own sense of authenticity and direction, to make us recognize where we have fallen short so that we can come back to seeking God more authentically. That's what Jesus is confronting in the gospel today. The scribes and Pharisees are critiquing his disciples for breaking what seems to be these kind of the laws, the ritual cleanliness laws of their time. And Jesus is challenging them and reminding them that the purpose that those laws exist is not for themselves, but for the authenticity and the faithfulness of the people. He reminds us that our true human frailty, those things that come from within, that sinfulness is the source of our brokenness. Not how well we always color within the lines. Not to dismiss, of course, the things that guide us in life, but to recognize the real purpose that they exist. And Jesus is saying to them, you hypocrites, you've lost track of why it is we have come here and the traditions that we follow. On the second reading, St. James reminds us that true religion is to care for widows and orphans in their affliction and to prevent the world from defiling us. But I think you know as well as I do that those of us within the church, held within the body of Christ, are just as susceptible to the brokenness and the darkness and the evils of the world. Our challenge is to search for something greater, and we're given a context in which we can be held to a deeper place, knowing God's love for us that we are called to share with one another, and yet we too often fall short. The problems of the world are indeed the problems of the church. We are not protected from it. We're not somehow separate from all that surrounds us. And that is a great challenge. And if you've been attentive to the news media lately, you've seen that we are experiencing that in a very deep and painful way as a community of faith. The broken trust, the broken hearts, the scarred lives through those who have experienced abuse at the hands of their priests and those who could not find justice because of the mishandling of these situations by their leadership. And so for many of us that may give us pause and say, well then where is the goodness in this body that we are part of? Did we get too obsessed with the externals and looking right and forgot what it was inside that we were called to be? And yet, as we gather as a community of faith, we are reminded of the authenticity of who we are, of what it is to be sometimes a broken, scarred, and hurt body, but God's body nonetheless. We are challenged in this time to recognize that if the problems we face within the body of the church are the very problems that infect the world that surrounds us, as we've seen with the challenges of sex abuse in all facets of society, at all levels, then our challenge as a church is not to walk away because it has happened to us and in our midst, but to see that how we respond to it may be a transforming reality in our own world. For that first part of St. James' statement, that not only is true religion keeping the world from defiling us, but that it is to respond to widows and orphans in their affliction, that true religion is to reach out to encounter, nurture, and heal pain, suffering, and struggle in our midst. That even when it's our own, that mandate still exists. The challenge we face is to be a testimony to the world, not of what it is to be perfect, not of what it is to be apart from all the struggles that confront our humanity, but to say that we can walk in healing and reconciliation, that we can seek love in a new and transforming way, that we can find a new depth of openness and transparency and vulnerability that seems contrary to all that surrounds us. Because although we may face the very same afflictions as the rest of the world, because of who we are and the closeness of what it is to walk with God as His body, receiving His sacraments, being nourished by the presence of His Son, it's in the midst of that that we can say, sin does not have to beget sin. Terrible things may have befallen parts of us, and yet we can get up in a new way. Be a testimony to the rest of the world of what it is to walk through darkness and find the light. Because if we walk away from this community, we will find the same pain and the same scars in new places. But we may not find the same conduit of healing and grace. And we know that these realities confront us at every level of our society and our community. In fact, the place where abuse happens most frequently is within the home. Unknown, behind closed doors, hidden in families, and veiled in shame. But if we as a community of faith can continue to move forward as we have for some time in this diocese, and say we can seek healing, we can name truth, we can ask for justice, we can foster peace, then we model for ourselves, for our families, and for all the society that surrounds us what it is to truly know God. Not just in His perfection, but in our frailty. It's there that we reconnect with what it is to not live a life of faith simply by going through the motions, by living out the laws, by crossing our T's and dotting our I's, but by being motivated by the love of Christ that exists within us. A love that sometimes we only find most clearly when we've encountered the depth of what it is to not see love. When we see the openness that's left in the vacuum, in the space of pain, suffering, and betrayal. But as challenging as this moment may be for our church in the United States and around the world, it's also a profound opportunity to allow God to love us anew, to be a source of regeneration and renewal, to seek hope in new ways. Last week we distributed Archbishop Wester's letter, and in the course of this week he released another statement to the press in which he was calling us to recognize that in the midst of this brokenness, it's not an opportunity for us to fall back into all our other human imperfections. Some are using this as an opportunity to pull on the different polemics and polls and divisions that exist within the church between different factions. But this is a moment for us to come together in openness and vulnerability, to care for one another, to walk with each other, and to seek authentic healing. It's a time for us to be able to admit, as we do at the beginning of every Mass, our collective imperfection. Not only in the leadership of our church and in its clergy, but in each and every one of us. A chance to examine our own call to conversion, to understand how the world has impacted us, but also to see what our call is to impact the world.